They didn't argue with me at the gate. They didn't hesitate either. My ex-wife stepped onto the plane like she was late for dinner. My son followed, headphones in, already detached. She turned just once. "Good luck getting home," she said, smiling. "You'll figure it out. You always do." Then they were gone. I stood there with no boarding pass. No cash. No one waiting for me anywhere. People pretended not to stare. The gate agent avoided my eyes. And for the first time, I understood something clearly. They didn't leave me because they were angry. They left me because they thought I no longer mattered. What they didn't realize was that walking away from me was the one mistake they couldn't undo. You don't lose your family all at once. You're slowly erased. After the divorce, nothing dramatic happened. No shouting. No lawyers screaming at each other. Just silence. I moved into a small apartment. Sold the house. Kept the car a little longer than most people would. It wasn't a hard life. It was a quiet one. At first, my son still called. Short conversations. Surface-level updates. Then the calls became texts. Then the texts became obligations. Eventually, my name stopped showing up on his phone at all. My ex-wife noticed before I did. She corrected me in public, joked about my simple lifestyle, smiled when others laughed. Never cruel enough to defend myself against. Never kind enough to forget. If you've ever felt tolerated instead of wanted, you know that space. The space where you're still invited but no longer welcome. I stayed quiet, not because I was weak, but because I still believed love might come back if I didn't provoke it. I didn't know then that silence was exactly what they were counting on. Being tolerated feels worse than being hated. The next time we sat down for dinner, I realized I wasn't there as family. I was there as an obligation. My son scrolled on his phone while I spoke. Not discreetly, openly. Every sentence I started seemed to land in empty space. When I paused, hoping he'd look up, my ex-wife answered for him. Corrected details, adjusted my words so they sounded smaller. She never raised her voice. She didn't need to. There's a special kind of humiliation that comes from being spoken around instead of spoken to. If you've ever been in a room where your presence feels inconvenient, you know exactly what I mean. At one point, I reached for the check. A simple reflex. Something I'd done for years. She stopped me with a smile. "I've got it," she said, loud enough for the table next to us to hear. "Let's not pretend." Pretend what? That I still belonged? That I was still capable? My son didn't defend me. He didn't even react. That hurt more than her words. On the drive home, I didn't feel angry. I felt replaced, like my role had expired, and no one bothered to tell me. That night, I sat alone in my apartment and stared at my phone, wondering when trying became embarrassing. And somewhere far beyond my quiet little life, someone else was taking notes. I just didn't know it yet. Humiliation hurts more when it's done calmly. The call came 2 weeks later. Mid-morning. A time chosen carefully when people assume you're free because you don't matter. My ex-wife didn't waste time. "We need to set boundaries," she said. "Not talk. Not work things out. Boundaries." She explained that my son felt uncomfortable when my name appeared on his phone, that it reminded him of pressure, of expectations. I asked if he'd said that himself. She paused just long enough for me to understand the answer didn't matter. "He's an adult," she said. "He doesn't owe anyone emotional labor." If you've ever been spoken about like a problem instead of a person, you know that tone. Polite. Finot. I told her I just wanted to stay in his life. She sighed, like I'd asked for something unreasonable. "Love isn't enough," she said. "You have to bring value." Value. As if fatherhood were a transaction. As if time, sacrifice, and presence depreciated the moment money ran out. She suggested kindly that I step back. Let him grow without being reminded of limitations. Mine. When the call ended, the apartment felt smaller. I sat there for hours, staring at the wall, replaying her words. I realized something then. They weren't angry with me. They were done with me. And once people decide you're expendable, they stop being careful. That's when they reveal who they really are. Hope is dangerous when you're the only one holding it. When the invitation came, I thought it meant something. A trip. Overseas. A chance to spend time together again. My ex-wife explained it carefully, like a favor she didn't owe me. "There's a conference," she said. "Family-friendly. Networking matters." She said my son needed a father there. Someone who looked stable. Normal. I didn't ask why I suddenly qualified again. I didn't ask what changed. If you've ever been pushed aside and then quietly pulled back in, you know how tempting that feels. You don't question it. You accept it. I paid for my ticket with a credit card I shouldn't have used. Told myself it was an investment in something that still mattered. At the airport, they looked polished. Effortless. I looked like myself. Clean. Ordinary. My son nodded when he saw me. Didn't hug me. Didn't avoid me either. That felt like progress. On the flight, they spoke in low voices I wasn't included in. I stared out the window, rehearsing conversations that never happened. I thought maybe distance had softened things. I didn't realize I wasn't there to reconnect. I was there to serve a purpose. And once that purpose was fulfilled, they were done pretending. You can feel when you're no longer the reason you're invited. The hotel lobby made it clear. Everything was polished, quiet, expensive in a way that doesn't ask permission. They walked ahead of me, like they'd done it 1,000 times. I followed with my single bag, suddenly aware of how out of place I looked without anyone saying a word. At check-in, my ex-wife handled everything. Keys, names, upgrades. I stood there, hands folded, like a guest who arrived early. When the clerk asked if we were together, she answered without looking at me. Yes, family. The word landed flat. Upstairs they moved quickly, calls, emails, meetings. My son slipped into conversations I didn't understand, using terms I didn't recognize, shaking hands with people who didn't acknowledge me at all. When I tried to join in, my ex-wife redirected the conversation smoothly. He's just here to support, she said. Support, not participate, not contribute, just exist quietly. That night, I sat alone in the room, listening to the muted sounds of the city outside the window. I told myself it was temporary, that tomorrow would be better. If you've ever convinced yourself to wait one more day, one more chance, you know how heavy that hope becomes. I didn't see it yet, but my role had already been decided. And once people decide what you're worth, they rarely reconsider. The moment you stop being useful is the moment kindness disappears. By the second day, I understood the pattern. I was included just enough to be visible, never enough to matter. During meetings, I sat at the edge of tables. At dinners, I was placed beside people who asked polite questions and forgot my answers immediately. My son barely spoke to me unless someone was watching. When they weren't, he drifted back to his phone, back to a world that didn't include me. That afternoon, my ex-wife pulled me aside. Not sharply, not angrily. Calm, controlled. You don't really fit here, she said, scanning the room as if evaluating furniture placement. These people don't understand you. I asked what that meant. She smiled. It means you make things awkward without trying. If you've ever been blamed for existing in the wrong room, you know how that feels. Later that evening, I overheard her speaking to someone I didn't recognize. Yes, his father is here, she said. A temporary thing. Temporary. That word settled in my chest. I realized then that I wasn't invited to be family. I was invited to be evidence. Proof that my son had roots. That his success didn't come from nowhere. And once that proof was no longer needed, there would be no reason to keep me around. I didn't confront them. I didn't ask questions. I just waited. Because deep down, I could feel it coming. The moment where they would finally stop pretending. Some goodbyes are planned long before they happen. The last morning felt different. Quieter. My ex-wife was efficient in a way that made my chest tighten. Packing quickly, checking her phone. Already elsewhere. My son barely acknowledged me. At breakfast, she slid 2 boarding passes across the table. First class. Side by side. I waited. She didn't look up. Your flight is tomorrow, she said finally. Economy, middle seat. I asked why. She sighed, like I'd missed something obvious. We have commitments back home. Important ones. Important enough to leave me behind. I told her I didn't have money for another night. She shrugged. That's not our responsibility. The words didn't sting right away. They settled slowly. My son stood up, already done with the conversation. You'll figure it out, he said. You always do. They walked away before I could respond. I sat there staring at the untouched plate in front of me, listening to the low murmur of other guests. No one intervened. No one asked questions. That's how abandonment usually looks. Clean, efficient, socially acceptable. At the airport, they made it public. She raised her voice so others could hear, so no one would misunderstand. Good luck getting home without money. People stared. My son didn't. And as their plane pulled away from the gate, something inside me finally went quiet. Not anger. Clarity. Because once someone leaves you like that, there's no confusion left. Only consequences. When you're left behind, the world doesn't stop. It watches. The gate emptied faster than I expected. First-class passengers disappeared down the jet bridge, their conversations trailing off like nothing unusual had happened. I stayed where I was. No ticket. No plan. No one asking questions. The gate agent finally looked at me, then quickly looked away. Pity makes people uncomfortable. I checked my wallet again like the number might change. $17. Enough for a coffee. Not enough for a mistake. I sat down near the window and watched the plane pull back. Watched the ground crew disconnect the cables. Watched the nose turn away from the terminal. That was the moment it hit me. They didn't expect me to come after them. They expected me to disappear quietly. If you've ever been abandoned, you know that feeling. The mix of shock and stillness. The strange calm that comes after humiliation finishes doing its worst. Families walked past me, children dragging backpacks, parents arguing softly about seats and snacks. Normal life. I wasn't angry. I was tired. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the need to explain myself to anyone. I took out my phone, scrolled past missed calls that would never come, past messages I'd already answered too many times. Then I tapped one name. Not family. Not a friend. Someone who had been waiting for a call like this. When the line connected, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "It's done," I said. There was a pause on the other end. Then a single reply. "Understood. We'll proceed." I hung up and leaned back in the chair. Whatever happened next, they had already chosen it. And some choices don't come with second chances. Some phone calls change nothing. Others change everything. I didn't leave the airport right away. I sat there long enough for the noise to fade into a low hum rolling suitcases, distant announcements, footsteps that didn't belong to me. Only then did my phone vibrate. A message from my son. "You okay?" That was it. No apology. No concern about where I'd sleep. Just a checkbox. So he could tell himself he'd tried. I didn't answer. Because if you respond too quickly, people assume you're still available. Instead, I stood up and walked toward the exit, counting each step like it mattered. Outside, the air was colder than I expected. Sharp, honest. I found a bench near the taxi line and sat down again, watching drivers negotiate fares with travelers who had options. That's when my phone rang. A different name this time. She didn't waste words. "We have confirmation," she said. Everything was recorded, witnesses included. I closed my eyes. For months, I'd hoped I wouldn't need this call, that things would soften before reaching this point. They hadn't. "Once we move forward," she continued, "there's no reversal. Are you certain?" I thought about the laughter at the gate, the way my son hadn't looked back, the way my ex-wife raised her voice so strangers would hear. "Yes," I said. She paused, then spoke carefully. "Then it will be finalized within 72 hours. I ended the call and sat there for a long moment. I didn't feel victorious. I felt finished. Finished asking. Finished hoping. Because from this point on, the process didn't need me anymore. It would move on its own. And when it did, it wouldn't be quiet. Power doesn't arrive with noise. It arrives with paperwork. I didn't go back to the hotel they'd stayed in. I chose a smaller place near the airport. Clean, quiet, forgettable. The kind of place no one takes photos of. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Not because things were resolved, but because I'd stopped pretending they would be. The next morning, my phone lit up with missed calls. My ex-wife. 3 times. I didn't answer. People who abandon you don't get immediate access to your time. Instead, I met with someone I'd never met in person before. A woman in her 60s. Calm. Precise. She slid a folder across the table. Dates. Times. Statements. Every remark. Every public humiliation. Every decision that proved intent instead of impulse. "This clause exists for a reason," she said. "It's not about money. It's about character." I nodded. I'd lived the evidence. Seeing it documented felt strange, like reading your own life written in a language you never learned. "They'll be notified soon," she added. "Not by you." Good. I didn't want the satisfaction. I wanted the finality. When I left the meeting, my phone buzzed again. A text this time. "We should talk. There's been a misunderstanding." I read it once, then I put my phone back in my pocket and kept walking. Some misunderstandings are permanent, and some conversations come too late to matter anymore. They reached out when they sensed the ground shifting. I landed back home 2 days later. No greeting. No reunion. Just my car waiting where I'd left it, untouched, like nothing in the world had changed. But things had changed. I felt it in the way my phone kept lighting up. Calls I didn't answer her. Texts that grew longer, softer, more careful. First irritation, then concern, then urgency. My ex-wife left a voicemail that evening. Her voice was different, measured, controlled, as if she were negotiating something fragile. "Let's talk before things get complicated," she said. "I think we misunderstood each other." Misunderstood. That word always appears when certainty collapses. My son texted an hour later. "Mom's stressed. Can we meet when you're back?" No apology. No acknowledgement of what they'd done. Just pressure to smooth things over before consequences finished arriving. I didn't respond. Instead, I sat in my apartment and opened an envelope that had been delivered while I was gone. Official letterhead. Formal language. A process moving forward without emotion. That's when it became real. Not dramatic. Not cinematic. Just inevitable. I wondered if they felt it yet, the subtle panic that comes when privilege starts slipping through your fingers. Because once people like that realize something is wrong, they don't reflect. They scramble. And scrambling never looks dignified. I turned my phone face down on the table and let it stay there. For the first time in years, I wasn't available. And that frightened them more than any argument ever could. Public places make people braver and consequences louder. They asked to meet at a hotel lobby. Not my place. Not theirs. Neutral ground. When I arrived, they were already there, seated carefully where others could see them. That was deliberate. My ex-wife stood first, smoothing her jacket, scanning the room before looking at me. "We just want to clear the air," she said. "Clear it for who?" My son didn't meet my eyes. Hands folded, jaw tight. They spoke calmly, the way people do when they believe composure equals innocence. She explained stress, miscommunication, pressure. He nodded along, adding just enough regret to sound reasonable. No one said the word airport. No one mentioned being left behind. That omission told me everything. At one point, she lowered her voice. "Whatever this is," she said, "we can fix it quietly." Quietly. As if what they'd done hadn't been loud on purpose. As if strangers hadn't heard her say I wasn't their responsibility. I listened without interrupting. Because when people explain themselves too much, they reveal what they're afraid of. My son finally looked up. "We're family," he said. "That has to mean something." I stood. "You decided it didn't," I replied. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I simply left. Behind me, their conversation resumed faster now, sharper. Because in that moment, they understood something important. This wasn't about forgiveness anymore. It was about damage control. And damage control only matters when the damage is real. The truth doesn't rush. It waits for the right room. The invitation arrived 2 days later. Formal. Heavy paper. A location that carried weight. An annual event people dressed carefully for and spoke about afterward. I knew they would be there. My ex-wife wouldn't miss it, not with her reputation, her connections, her carefully rebuilt image. My son wouldn't either. He still believed proximity to power meant protection. When I walked into the ballroom that night, nothing stopped. Laughter continued. Glasses clinked. Conversations flowed around me like water around a stone. That's how influence works. It doesn't announce itself. I took my seat near the front, exactly where the name card told me to sit. Across the room, I saw them. My ex-wife looked confident again, relaxed, as if the last week had already been rewritten in her mind. My son stood beside her, smiling politely, shaking hands, playing his role. They didn't notice me at first. And that was important, because people behave most honestly when they think the moment belongs to them. The lights dimmed slightly. The room quieted. A figure stepped to the podium. No drama, no build-up, just a calm voice with authority behind it. "I want to speak tonight about character," the voice said. That's when my ex-wife turned her head, and that's when our eyes met. For the first time since the airport, she looked uncertain, not afraid, just unsure. Because uncertainty only appears when control is already gone. Some announcements don't raise voices. They remove masks. The speaker didn't rush. He didn't smile either. He talked about responsibility, about trust, about how wealth, influence, and family only mean something when they're carried with restraint. People listened, not because they were entertained, but because they were being measured. I watched my ex-wife's posture change. She leaned forward slightly now, Attention sharpened. The way people lean in when they think their name might be mentioned for the right reasons. My son followed her lead, nodding at phrases he thought applied to him. Then the speaker paused. Not dramatically, just long enough. Over the past year, he continued, we've evaluated who should carry forward certain responsibilities. The word evaluated did something to the room. It introduced a past tense decisions already made. I felt it before I saw it. My ex-wife's smile tightened. My son stopped nodding. And in that process, the speaker said calmly, we paid close attention to how people treat those they believe have no leverage. That was when she turned fully in her chair. Her eyes scanned the room not for me, but for reassurance. She didn't find it. Character, the speaker said, is revealed when no one important is watching. A quiet ripple moved through the audience. I didn't move. I didn't need to. Because in that moment, they weren't wondering if something was wrong anymore. They were realizing something irreversible had already happened, and they had no idea how far it went. The moment power shifts, silence becomes heavy. The announcement continued without emotion. Names were mentioned. Roles clarified. Decisions finalized. Each sentence landed like a sealed envelope already delivered, already signed. When my name was spoken, it wasn't dramatic. No pause. No emphasis. Just certainty. A few heads turned. Some people nodded, as if this explained things they'd already sensed. Across the room, my ex-wife froze. Not visibly, she was too practiced for that, but in the way her hands stopped moving, the way her eyes stopped scanning. My son leaned toward her, whispering something urgent. She didn't answer. The speaker moved on, listing responsibilities, expectations, transitions. No mention of loss. No mention of punishment. Just absence. And absence is louder than accusation. I felt eyes on me now, not curious, but respectful. The kind that comes when people realize you were underestimated on purpose. My ex-wife finally looked directly at me. Her expression wasn't anger. It was calculation, trying to understand what had changed, trying to measure how far things had slipped, because people like her don't panic immediately. They wait for confirmation, and confirmation arrived quietly, in the form of a program placed back on the table. Her name wasn't there. My son noticed next. He flipped the page once, then again. Then he stopped. That's when I stood. Not to speak, not to explain, just to leave my seat and walk toward the side door. Behind me, the room remained calm, but I could feel it, the realization spreading. Something had ended, and whatever came next would not ask for their permission. Loss doesn't announce itself. It spreads quietly. I didn't stay for the rest of the event. I didn't need to. The shift had already happened, and people like my ex-wife could feel it before they understood it. In the hallway outside the ballroom, my phone vibrated. Once. Then again. I didn't check it. Behind me, doors opened. Footsteps followed. Wait, she said. Not loudly. Not yet. I turned. Up close, she looked different. Still polished. Still composed. But the certainty was gone. What's going on? She asked. Not what did you do. Not why. Just confusion. That's always the first crack. My son stood beside her, eyes darting between us, searching for context like a child who just realized the rules changed mid-game. You should go back inside, I said calmly. They're about to finish. She laughed softly, the way people do when they think confidence can be restored with sound. This isn't funny, she said. There's been some mistake. Mistake. That word again. I shook my head. No, I replied. This is what happens after choices. Her phone buzzed in her hand. She glanced down instinctively. Then again, and again. The color drained from her face, not all at once, but enough. She didn't look at me after that. She looked at the screen, and I knew, without needing to hear it, that the second phase had begun. Because public announcements bruise pride. But paperwork? Paperwork destroys illusions. And illusions were all they had left. Reality arrives in notifications, not arguments. She didn't answer the first call. She stared at the screen like it had insulted her. Then she declined the second one. By the third, her hand was shaking just enough to notice. My son leaned closer. What is it? He asked. She didn't respond. Instead, she opened the message. I didn't need to read it to know what it said. Words like account review, temporary hold. Please contact your representative. Language designed to sound polite while removing the ground beneath you. Her confidence collapsed inward. Not dramatically, not loudly, just a subtle loss of balance like someone realizing the floor isn't where it used to be. My son took the phone from her hand. His face changed faster. Younger people panic sooner. They haven't learned how to pretend control. What does this mean? He asked, voice low but sharp. She finally looked at me then. Not with anger, not with blame, with something closer to fear. You knew, she said. It wasn't a question. I nodded once. That was all. Behind us, the event continued. Applause drifted through the hallway. Laughter followed. Inside that room, nothing had gone wrong. Only outside of it. This can be fixed, she said quickly. We just need to talk to the right people. I stepped back. You already did, I said. They were watching. That was when she understood. Not the money, not the loss, but the reason. They hadn't failed because of what they did. They failed because of who they were when they thought it didn't matter. And that realization was irreversible. Apologies sound different when they're motivated by fear. She called the next morning. Not texted. Not emailed. Called. That alone told me how bad things had become. Her voice was softer now, measured carefully, like every word cost something. We need to talk, she said. Privately. I didn't respond right away. Silence makes people reveal their urgency. I didn't realize how serious this was, she added quickly. We said things we didn't mean. Didn't mean. I looked out the window of my apartment, the same one they'd mocked, dismissed, used as evidence of my irrelevance. I meant everything I said, she continued. I just didn't think it would matter. There it was. Not regret. Not guilt. Misjudgment. My son sent a message an hour later. Can we meet? I need to explain. Explain what? That respect only existed when it was profitable? That family mattered only when it came with benefits? I didn't reply, because apologies that arrive after consequences aren't apologies. They're negotiations. By afternoon, the calls stopped. Not because they felt better, because they were busy. Busy learning what bills look like when no one intercepts them. Busy discovering how quickly doors close when names stop carrying weight. That night, I slept without checking my phone. For the first time in years, there was nothing left to clarify. Only distance. And distance, once established honestly, is a form of peace. Starting over feels humiliating until you realize it's honest. I heard about their situation through other people. That's how it usually happens once you stop being involved. A friend mentioned seeing my ex-wife at a grocery store, staring at prices longer than necessary. Someone else said my son had moved into a smaller place, farther from the city, closer to reality. No one said it with cruelty, just observation. They were adjusting, learning what it meant to live without buffers, without safety nets, disguised as entitlement. I didn't celebrate it. I didn't need to, because watching people live with the consequences of their choices is different from causing them harm. One afternoon, I drove past my old neighborhood. Same streets, same houses, different perspective. I realized something then. They hadn't lost everything. They'd lost the illusion that they were special, that someone would always step in, that status could replace character. And for the first time, they were facing life without an audience that applauded automatically. My phone buzzed once more that week. A message from my son. I get it now, I really do. I read it twice. Then, I locked my phone and set it down. Understanding doesn't undo damage. Awareness doesn't restore trust. Some lessons arrive too late to repair what they break. And some bridges, once crossed carelessly, aren't meant to be rebuilt. That's not punishment. That's alignment. They thought money was the reason. It never was. The paperwork finalized 3 days later. No announcement. No celebration. Just signatures, dates, and a number so large it stopped feeling real. $340 million. An empire built long before my marriage ever existed. One I was never supposed to inherit by default. It wasn't a reward. It was a responsibility granted only after one condition was met. Character. The clause was simple. Anyone who abandons family when they believe no one important is watching forfeits everything. They didn't fail because they left me at an airport. They failed because they laughed while doing it. I never called them afterward, never reminded them what they lost. They learned on their own through frozen accounts, unanswered calls, and doors that no longer opened. As for me, I didn't upgrade my life the way people expect. I upgraded my silence. The power wasn't the money. It was knowing I never had to explain myself again. If you're listening to this and you've ever been underestimated, ever dismissed because you seemed ordinary, remember this. The quiet ones are often being tested, not ignored. And tests don't end when people think they've won. If this story hit close to home, tell me where you're listening from. And let me know, did they underestimate you too? Subscribe if you want more stories like this. Not loud, not violent, just consequences delivered on time.